Hi, it's Mr. H, and today we're going to work on line 2 of the level 5 rhythms. First, I'll demonstrate the rhythm line to you. We'll put on our metronome, and here we go. Ready, start. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, 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 ta. Okay, if you're able to follow along with that, go ahead and try it yourself. If not, keep watching and we'll look at each measure individually. The first thing I'd like to point out here is that this measure right here, the first measure, and the second measure, as well as the the last measure of line 1, are all very similar. Even though they look different, they're tapped exactly the same. Let's review the last measure of the first line. This would be ta, 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 And if we do that in time, it would go ta, 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 And then if we compare that to the first measure of the second line, it's ta, 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 we're going to kind of hold that quarter note out, because as we do this more and more, we're going to need to realize that a quarter note is the same as two eighth notes that are tied together. So what we're really doing is keeping a steady eighth note beat when we're tapping. So we've talked a lot about having, tapping quarter notes and having 4 beats in a measure. But as we look at it more closely, we're also tapping upbeats, and those upbeats are the eighth notes. So we're keeping track of both quarter notes and eighth notes when we tap. And going forward, that's going to be something to remember. So we'll tap this one. Ta, 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 ta. And we'll just again compare the first measure of line 2 here to the last measure of line 1. The only difference in those lines is that in the first line we have an eighth note followed by an eighth rest, so it's ta, and in the second line we have a quarter note, so it's ta. But otherwise it sounds exactly the same. Also, remembering that a quarter rest is 2 eighth rests, if we look at beat 2 here, that would be the same as 2 eighth rests there. So these measures, as I said, are more or less identical. Let's look at the second measure now. The second measure, as we said, is going to tap the same as the other two. So there's your 4 beats. This would be ta, 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 ta. And again, comparing it to measure 1, this would be ta, and then the quarter rest is because we're thinking of it as 2/8 rests. And then the last part of this is exactly the same. So the end of this measure has 2/8 notes and a quarter note, and the end of the first measure has 2/8 notes and a quarter note. So that measure will sound the same as the first. Let's go ahead and do the first two measures of line 2. Ready, start. Ta, 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 ta. If you've got that, terrific. We're going to go ahead to the next measure, but if you need to go a little bit slower or review that, go ahead and pause the video. Let's look at line 3. Now line 3 by itself I think is pretty simple. This is a review. We've talked before about how 2 quarter notes tied together would be ta, and we've also talked about how a half note is the same as 2 quarter notes tied together. So this half note is also ta, ah. There's 4 beats in a measure, so a beat for each quarter note, and then 2 beats for the half note. By itself, this will be hopefully a pretty simple measure to do. Ready, go. Ta, ta. What's going to be complicated, though, is how that measure fits with everything else. And when we get to that measure, it's going to seem like it slows down, but it really doesn't. It's just made up of longer notes. We're going to turn the metronome a little bit slower and do the first 3 measures. Ready, start. Ta, 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 ta. Maybe it seemed like the third measure slowed down, but it didn't. The beat stayed the same. The notes are just longer. Also, if you remember what we talked about earlier in this video, we said that quarter notes now are going to seem like 2/8 notes because we're keeping an 1/8 note beat. So you may notice that quarter notes are going to begin to seem like they have 4 beats in them. And the half note would also seem like it has 4 beats. There's not 4 beats, there's 4 1/8 notes. There's 2 1/8 notes and a quarter note, and then the half note has 2 beats in it as well. So there's still 4 quarter note beats, but we're also keeping track of 1/8 notes. Let's practice this measure one more time, and this time we'll try to show the downs and ups a little bit better. Ready, and go. Ta, ta. So the bouncing ball there was meant to show both the down and the up, the same way that your finger would move. Let's go on to the 4th measure. The 4th measure has a new idea in it. First of all, let's review that we have a 1/8 note followed by an 1/8 rest, and as we've said before, we would just say ta for that. In the next measure, in the next beat, we switch that around. And so the 1/8 rest comes first, and then the 1/8 note. So that will be ta. Your finger will be moving down for the first eighth note of the beat. It'll move up for the second eighth note of the beat. And then we go to beat 2. The first eighth note is actually an eighth rest. Your finger goes down for that, and your finger goes up for the note. So this would go ta, ta. We're thinking of two separate beats here, but then putting it together. The second half of this measure is done exactly the same way. So if we take a look at how the beats go, it starts with an eighth note followed by an eighth rest, and then an eighth rest followed by an eighth note. So the first half of the measure and the second half of the measure are exactly the same. This part starting here is ta, ta. If we put it all together from the beginning, we have ta, 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 ta. As we continue to work on these eighth notes and eighth rests, we're going to slow the metronome down even more because we want to be able to keep track of both the downbeats and the upbeats. When we're doing quarter notes, it's easier because we can sort of just think of the downs and it's fine. But as we start to pay more attention to eighth notes and eighth rests, we really want to keep track of the both the downbeat and the upbeat. Let's try this measure. Ready, go. Ta, 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 ta. And again, the bouncing ball is meant to show the downs and ups of your finger as you do this. We'll back it up now and try the second and third measure. As always, I would suggest pausing the video and practicing individual measures extra before you try to keep moving. If you're having difficulty with the fourth measure, take your time and figure it out carefully. We'll start here and go to the end. Ready, start. Ta, 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 ta. As I mentioned before, the tied quarter notes and half notes are going to seem much longer now, so we have to be patient on those notes. Starting in the second measure now. Ready, go. Ta, 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 ta. Once again, and I apologize if I keep saying the same thing over and over, but this is where, for some people, it gets complicated. We have to remember that there's still 4 beats in this measure, and after each down is an up, oops. So with the metronome, this third measure's going to go by a little slowly. We're probably going to feel this a little different than you're used to. One more time, this measure would be ta, ta. We're keeping track of all the downs and the ups, making it seem like there's 2 beats in the quarter notes. And it may seem complicated now, but this is going to be very helpful when we start to learn even harder rhythms. Let's try this entire line from the beginning. Ready and go. ta 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 ta. If you understand that, terrific. Go ahead and try it on your own. Feel free to rewind to the beginning. If you're still having trouble, check out part 2 of the Level 5 Rhythms line 2. We're going to take a completely different look at this line in 4/8 time, and for some of you that might be easier. As always, practice. Feel free to come back to this another day because it can often take several practice sessions to learn a difficult line of music, and just keep trying. We'll see you next time.